Hey, what?
No,
What's
no.
happening? The what? The what? What you talking about? The what? That'd be
No,
great.
By the way, I am
What do
streaming
you
now
got?
just to
What
make
do you
sure
got?
that everything's going through.
No poker chips.
Oh, no, I know what the
No,
problem.
the,
By the way, I am streaming.
Yeah, I
So,
saw.
so it is that because OBS doesn't care that I'm muted in Discord. I know what I need to do now.
Right.
But you're correct. I should not have. I need to not fidget with shit.
It's a good rule. It's honestly, it's a good rule of thumb anyway.
Yeah. Well.
Even if you can, it's always the one time you shouldn't be that you do that gets picked up. I've learned
Yeah.
that through thousands of shoots.
Let me figure out how to get a
Unfortunately.
link for this damn thing.
Yep.
Sorry,
Sorry, Colin, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just feel
no,
like you
I
don't
was-
have a lot, so you should save it for the podcast. Just kidding.
You are
love you.
feisty, huh?
I
That's-
got into an argument with an idiot. This is my
I am not an idiot.
No, I didn't get an argument with Ben.
Yeah.
Ben and I think I've rarely ever, even when working with Ben, disagreed with anything Ben has ever said.
Aw.
I haven't always been in the power to enact those things. Certainly not in our previous job,
Right.
where I was told I had to explain what a roadie was over and over and over again in plain English. Because people would get it. They're stupid. Apparently.
Okay.
It turns out that's wrong.
All right.
Okay.
So this is number 154. When you're ready, I'm going to start our. So I've started the stream.
Oh,
Stream's good, or it sounds good.
You just assume I don't know what number it is?
Yes,
Oh, okay. That's fair.
I do indeed assume that you have no idea what number it is, because you ask every time. All right. So I'm going to start the recording,
Maybe
and we can
maybe I
kick
just
off.
have OCD.
I mean, don't we all?
Yeah, I mean, probably have enough switches flipped there. Okay, so you said you're ready?
I am.
You know, this is actually getting to fights with people online is a lot better than as a pump up for a podcast than drinking. I figured out.
Well, it certainly fits better into a Sunday morning than drinking.
Yeah. Happy Sunday.
Motherfuckers.
I'm enjoying my rum.
Well, good. That's if one of us is going to be drunk, it should be the guy in Sweden.
Yep. All right, here we go. Take a little more water, actually. I've been yelling a lot this morning. All right. Hello and welcome to Circling the Cup, San Jose Sharks podcast, episode number 154. That's correct, right, Ben? 154? Did I get it right?
Congratulations, you got it.
There you go. Hey, I'm Alex. You probably recognize my overly enthusiastic voice. Here with me, as always, the Honorable Ben. What's up, Ben?
I'm just looking forward to you being feisty today.
And of course, ready for all of you with a 1 second, what we call a pregnant pause in radio, Colin, live from Sweden. What's up, Colin?
Not much, just checking Kane's penalty minutes.
Ooh, so consistent, so consistent. Listen, folks, this is, full disclosure, this is the hardest podcast of the year to do every year. And that is because barely anything has happened, especially this season where we had a wonky offseason, very short training camp, no preseason whatsoever, and are not playing a particularly great team. So unlike a lot of other podcasts where we will have plenty to talk about, this time it's really more focused on things that we're kind of seeing in first impressions, but those first impressions not always accurate. So something to keep in mind as you're starting to read analysis or overreact or underreact to things after these first two games. Keep in mind that this is weird. It's weird. It's a weird season, right, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I have one deadlocked takeaway from the first two games, which is that Nicholas Milosh is not going to win the Calder.
Can we say? I want to take a second to actually talk about how bizarre this is. And this is not a knock on him as a player, but we're talking about a player who got no off-season buzz whatsoever, was not really mentioned in training camp other than, Shang Pang like the day before mentioning that he's on the ice, essentially. to suddenly crack the starting lineup without any fanfare or PR or buzz or talk is a bit bizarre. And I think I saw what happened coming a mile away, which was they put him in and he plays all of 5 minutes and 43 seconds, which means that Erik Karlsson winds up playing 32 minutes. But I can't think of another time that the Sharks, let alone another hockey team, has ever just randomly put a guy in a lineup without any buzz. Like, that was just, I don't know. It's not all about PR and marketing and hype and all that stuff, but how did he have an amazing training camp that wasn't talked about? It just seems weird to me. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, I'm not in the news sphere of the Sharks. I'm outside looking in and have to go and dig up all my news, but I feel like everybody who wasn't, Erik Karlsson, Evander Kane, Jones, or Couture was sort of a surprise announcement in the first game. Like Leonard, I'm like, cool. Who is this guy? He's fast. He seems to know what he's doing. Great. He got a point. That's wonderful. Like we have a bunch of new guys who our team almost seems embarrassed to put out, be like, okay, they're okay. They know how to play. Don't worry, we still got the big guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, from strictly a PR marketing standpoint, you're always going to put the known quantities ahead, and I think guys like Leonard or newcomer Donato, Gregor, obviously, even Pastrnak, who didn't really play or hasn't played yet, and is on the taxi squad. You heard those names. You didn't hear Milosh at all,
and you shouldn't have.
I mean, look, maybe there's something behind the scenes. We're obviously not. This is a really tricky training camp, right? Because we had no opportunity to attend this year, so it's not like any of us could sit there and go, no one's talking about this guy, but you might want to keep an eye out on him.
Right.
So that could be a little bit of it, but again, even in player interviews and coach interviews, it just wasn't a name that was brought up. And I'm not necessarily going to criticize the decision as much as it just caught me way off guard to see that third D pairing be what it was. It just felt like there were so many other defensive, names that were brought up consistently in training camp and again the offseason. It just felt weird, unless they were all magically injured at the same time and we just didn't know it, which, hey, happens.
Yeah, I mean, that could be what it was. It has been a kind of a chaotic offseason, so, the stuff that we might have normally gotten about Milosh and his, performance in training camp, earning him a spot in that first game may have just been obscured by the fact that, there kind of wasn't really much of a training camp and there were no preseason games, and who knows, maybe the team thought this was an exhibition game. The Sharks kind of played like it. I wanted to get back to something that Colin just said, which is, there are new players on the ice, and other than Milosh in game one, John Leonard being one, and new to us in Donato, but Leonard has a pedigree, right? I mean, he was a guy the Sharks drafted. He's a guy who's played very well in college. So he's the kind of player the Sharks have developed over the last few years and put in the lineup on, day one of a season, whether they deserved it or not, like Gambrell.
But wait, Ben.
Yeah.
Ben, I thought we didn't develop players.
Well, I'm using the term develop in the sense of, he's on the ice at the NHL level.
I mean, I think Ben's point is that Leonard, whether he was NHL ready or not was an unknown, but he as a name was not, because he is a significant name in college hockey.
Yeah.
So, having him make that transition or jump, which I can't really say jump this year because we have a lot of open positions that we need to fill. But even under normal circumstances, having him step in wouldn't have been a huge surprise, and also wasn't, because again, if you followed anything leading up to that first game, he was mentioned left and right.
I mean, and like Gambrell and like probably Josh Norris would have deserved if he'd stayed here, and like Chris Tierney or whatever, you're talking about a guy, not a first round pick, but a guy who, is picked high enough that the Sharks are going to give him a chance on the ice, right? Like, that's just what they do. Whereas
So-
Milosh is just like a spare part. Like, why is he starting game one? And then
wait.
as he showed by only playing 5 minutes, he probably shouldn't have been.
Well, I guess, and just to add to that, I mean, I know it's semantics, but why would he have been chosen to start over some of the other options specifically? Right. Because again, you got Pasternak, you've got guys who look like they seem like known at least AHL or bubble, at least in our system at the moment, players, and Militia seem to come out of the blue. Now, again, we're not there, so maybe there's something. It's just hard for me to. It's just hard for me to reconcile this idea that nothing was really said or pointed out ahead of time. That's what makes it so weird to me. Not that we tried to put someone in, because we were going to have to do that regardless in some of these positions. Again, Leonard or Gregor, who I know has had time and I've been hot on for a while, but still, right. They're relatively. That's you don't know they're bubbly right now. You don't really know whether or not they're going to be ready for NHL specifically. But yeah, this name again, that just baffles me that it came out of nowhere. Sorry, Colin, what were you going to say?
Well, two things now. First, I was a little surprised Merkley just disappeared back into the mist. I was thinking he would finally, get a decent look, but guess not.
I thought our coach said at one point that he just had an okay camp, and they're not looking to rush him if they can help it.
All right. I mean, I kind of want someone looking over the bench and going, you know what, coach, you're not having a great camp either. And the second thing is, are we finally back? Has the team brought up enough young players that we all get to pick one again? Where I get to again pick the new age Goodrow and be totally wrong until we trade him to a cup winner?
Well, yes, you're gonna have to do that because the Sharks have enough positions where they needed to. They need to backfill, and especially in this environment where, again, there's a lot of unknowns with COVID and sports and how it's affecting lineups, especially with who the Sharks have as far as depth is concerned. You're gonna see players that you either haven't seen before or we didn't really get to see very much of because the last season was cut short.
All right.
So yeah,
all right. So
this is actually the year to do that, to be wrong about it, Colin. This is the year to pick the wrong guy.
So what's the deal here? Any of our players under 23?
Yeah, a few.
Yes, sure.
I pick Ferraro. I'm backing Ferraro. That's my boy.
All right.
I'm going on D this year.
Hold on a second. You're picking the one that seems relatively obvious out of all of the ones that you could have picked. You do realize that, right? It's not like you're picking the dark horse of those guys. Let's talk about this a little bit. The Sharks played their first 2 games this week, both in Arizona, both against Arizona. One thing to point out, and I could be wrong because this is a crazy season and it's early, but I'm fairly confident saying I don't think Phoenix Coyotes are a good team. I really don't. And so,
and how are we compared to that not a good team?
That's one of the reasons I'm bringing it up is even though I think it's still early and I think the Sharks are trying to in the absence of exhibition games, trying to figure things out. And Ben and I talked about this a little bit off the cast, and I'm sure we'll talk about it during this cast. But there's Sharks should be looking a little bit long term, not necessarily short term here. But I've seen people go. This is going to sound really depressing, and I'm trying not to frame it that way because I did see some positives in these games. But I saw people going, "Oh, boy, the Sharks are," and I was like, "Yeah, it makes it worse." I don't think they're against a good team right now. I don't think it's not like they're playing, the Capitals or just grab a team who's going to be likely to be above average this year.
Las Vegas,
yeah, sure. This is a team that's not really an offensive powerhouse. And the Sharks gave up quite a few goals. There's a lot of things to be concerned. But what I wanted to start this conversation off with is actually one of the things that I thought was a positive so far. And look at some of the players who we have who seem like they're doing relatively well in this small sample size. One, Hurdle. I am super stoked because it looks like that guy's knee is made out of adamantium or just some crazy material, because it seems like you can take out his knee as many times as you want. He looks fine. In fact, he was, I thought, one of the better players, and his line was one of the better lines on and off, depending on a couple of situations. But I thought Hurdle's doing well, and Ferraro, which is actually where I made this transition. I don't think these. One of my 3 keys was the back half of the ice has to look good. I don't really think it's doing that. But one of the players I thought has looked better in that group has been Ferraro.
So,
and I find him fun to watch.
So first a comment, then a question for you, Alex.
Sure.
The comment is, I think Hurdle's butt is our most effective offensive weapon for possession, because he sticks his butt out and nobody can get the puck. So a question for you. Ferraro to me looked frantic, and not because he was playing frantic, but because there were so many gaps on defense, he didn't seem to know which one to try to cover first.
Sure. So one of the things that I felt like I saw, and again, this is just first impressions, is I didn't feel like the D was communicating any better than the D has been communicating the last couple of years, and that's a problem because one of the reasons that we've stated before that Jones has really struggled outside of Jones's own struggles, not clearing Jones of his own struggles, has been because the defense has been a mess, and assignments and covering for each other has been a mess, and I was kind of expecting that to be the case here because in the training camp and the leading up training camp, our coach was pretty clear that he was going to activate the D more, try to get them off the point and more involved in the play for the rub. And that immediately said to me, well, hey, we do technically have the pieces to do that. So that's kind of the right idea, but communication's also seemingly been an issue. So someone has to go back and cover. And we talked about that in the last podcast. And I think where I saw that the most, honestly, was with Karlsson and Burns.
Yep.
I'm really struggling with Karlsson, and I don't want to dump on the guy because I think he has tremendous skill. But what I will say is, for the amount that we are paying him, I've yet to feel that the Sharks organization understands how to properly integrate him into whatever system it is they're trying to do. Saw this with DeBoer, where hold on, I'll have to get over there. I'll call on you next. But it was there with DeBoer. It seemed like his usage was it just seemed like he was a piece that was really good, but wasn't necessarily fitting cohesively with everything else. And in these first 2 games, I felt like there was a bit of that there, like especially on the first game, the goal that tied the game at the last couple of seconds. He's wildly out of position. I'm not quite sure what he's doing. Ben.
So what I wanted to say here is actually I don't think the problem is Karlsson. I'm
not saying I think it's only him. Just to be clear.
I'm saying, and I'm going to explain why. The problem isn't Karlsson. The problem is the coaching staff, because they're doing the same thing DeBoer would have done, which is we've got Karlsson. He's an incredible passer from the back end, so we're going to design a breakout around that incredible passing. And then we're going to require all these guys who are not good at passing to do the same thing Karlsson does. Yep. And if you go back and you count every fucking missed pass from the defensive zone over the last 2 games that came off the stick of Ferraro or Middleton or Vlasic or what have you that ended up coming right back into the defensive zone, you can see what the problem is that the forwards are going to the opposing blue line for the breakout pass, and those passes aren't getting to them because you're asking fucking players who can't pass to be Karlsson. It's
Ben.
Yes.
So, did you happen to watch any of the Toronto games?
No, I have not. I've only watched Sharks games so far this season.
Give the Toronto games a watch because you'll see Spezza and Thornton. I mean, when they're skating, you'll see them just get shifted in these like very specialist role things, and their lines will change throughout the game, but it's always like with a method. And it's really interesting for me to watch because it's like, oh, this is how a coach can impact a roster with guys who are like 20 and guys who are like 42.
You mean have your lines play differently depending on who's on the ice? I mean,
yeah.
Wow, what a revolutionary idea.
This goes back to my point though, Ben, and I agree with you 100%, and that's kind of what I'm getting at here is I don't think the problem. I see a lot of fans pointing their finger directly at Karlsson. I don't necessarily think that the problem is Karlsson. I just don't think this team has figured out how to integrate his style to play appropriately with what they have.
Well, they can't. They can't.
Yeah, no,
that's the problem is, and this gets.
It's a folly. It's a folly to look at it. First of all, it's a folly in general to look at a player. I'm not saying they're necessary. We know that they're doing this because we don't, but it would be a huge folly to take any player, take Joe Thornton, and then just expect everyone to play like Joe Thornton. That would be like completely illogical.
Right, but let me elaborate on what I mean by they can't. So this gets into, as you talked about, one of the concerns we had and talked about last week is this idea that the defense is going to be more active in the offensive zone. Which of course, as you say, requires that the forwards be defensively minded and ready to. You call it a communication issue. I actually think it's a talent issue. Because your forwards that you're asking to be defensively minded are guys like Kevin LeBanc and Ryan Donato. And they're not defensively minded. They're right. So you have implemented a scheme that your players cannot actually execute. They can't. They're not built to do it. And you didn't have a training camp to break them of their bad habits, and you don't hold them accountable. Because you've got to let Brent Burns be Brent Burns, right? So again, coaching issue. Like they're not recognizing that the scheme they're trying to put in place, whether it's that Karlsson, should be driving, the breakout, or that guys like Burns and Karlsson need to be active in the defensive zone, the system doesn't fit the players.
It's a trap, and
it's
that's
a trap.
What I think sucks.
Yes,
it is a trap to have Burns and Karlsson on your roster because there's next to no situation where you've got two offensive-minded, defensemen with that skill level, right. Regardless of what you think the skill level is. I mean, we talked about this when we got Karlsson. There was those 2 seconds where everyone on the Sharks, fandom was drooling over the idea of a power play that had both those guys at the point at the same time. Like there was no way they weren't going to try to do that because how could you not? And I think you're right. And I think that's going to be a big issue if they can't work it out because look, like Jones can get as good as he wants to get. Dubnyk can come in and be amazing. Let's just say those things occur.
Right.
They're not going to be able to stand on their heads on the rate that would be required if this is sort of how the D is going to operate. So either the D needs to figure it out, and maybe this is the season that the Sharks use to do that because, Ben, you made a point offline where there's no fans.
Yeah, right.
So you're not losing as much money. I mean, you're losing money, but you don't have to worry about, the immediate season ticket sale here or, tickets to the gate. And you do have other marketing opportunities, which I pointed out. But, again, 2 games, but not encouraging.
And let's build on what you're saying there because that conversation we had offline is it calls back to things we've talked about a lot about the San Jose Sharks and how they operate and why they always seem to operate as if, the Stanley Cup window is open. Not that it's really been closed until last year, is because they can't afford to be realistic about this team maybe not being Stanley Cup capable because of how fickle the market is, right? People will stop going to Sharks games because they can instead go to, a myriad of other entertainment options in the Bay Area. But why operate like that this year? Gate doesn't matter. Nobody's going to games. This is the year to be realistic about what you're doing, which is rebuilding and retooling on the fly. Go ahead, Colin.
And I've got 2 positive points and then 2 questions for Ben because we've invoked a certain name twice so far and haven't let Ben dig in. So my positives, hey, we're still in the playoff run and it's January. Awesome. Second positive, we still have our first round pick. So let's put the tank in the Shark Tank.
Oh, why'd you just jinx that? You mean for now?
Oh yeah, thanks, Alex. So we've invoked the name Jones twice, and Ben hasn't gotten to say anything.
This is not Beetlejuice, Colin.
But two questions for Ben. First, how's Jones doing? Second, is there a zone in which you thought the Sharks did well?
Ooh.
So Jones
is garbage, and it was unrealistic to expect him to be better at his age. But
9-19 in the first game.
But goalie play is voodoo, and so who knows? As we've said many times, look, it's really hard to separate out, the bad scheme, bad play decisions. The second goal in the second Arizona game looked entirely like either Gregor or Donato wasn't where they were supposed to be. They got pulled out of position. I couldn't tell who because I don't understand the defensive scheme they're running. So, there's that, right? Like there are things that Jones can account for and things he can't. But again, I'm going to say it. I was all about, buying him out, waiving him in the offseason and just eating the $2 million a year because he is a Bermuda Triangle of hope. And this is not a team that is going to win a cup with him in goal.
Can I chime in there too? So
yeah.
I think, and again, this is a real small sample size.
Yes.
In the first game, I thought Jones positionally looked a bit better, but not better enough, and especially not better enough to make up for what I saw the defense doing.
That's a great way to put it.
Major issue.
Yep.
So and Dubnyk too. Like I said before, they can get as good as they want, but they can't be hung out to dry that much and be expected to make every save. And that's the thing that really concerns me here is you asked Colin if there was a zone. I thought there were a lot of bright moments, especially in the first game of some of the offensive, the forward core, at least the offensive play. But, this can't be another one of those seasons where we hope that the forwards dramatically outshoot the high number of goals that the Sharks let in, because look, that works if you're letting in like a goal. It's not going to work if it's like 3 goals
or 5.
Right? Yeah, it's not. Especially with the forward core we have now, and I like a lot of these guys. That's asking way too much out of those.
So, and to that point, right? Like you asked, to continue your.
Yep.
If I think they've been in it, I think the power play has been better, and I think the power play has been better because they're playing the diamond, and Burns isn't playing the point. It's led to the team missing some, letting some pucks slide out of the zone because they've only got one guy on the point. But it's also led to some great cross ice passes to make the goalie have to move laterally, which is what you want to do on the power play. So I do like the new power play system, and I think if they stick with it, I think it's for the better.
There's another part of the power play that, Ben, I'll invite you to start watching for because it's so delicious. When Burns slides into the Ovechkin spot and doesn't get the pass, he looks sad and confused for a moment and then realizes he has to keep rotating.
Right.
Well, listen,
I caught it a few times. I'm like, oh, Burnsy.
Let me just point something out. Like the Sharks needed to make adjustments in the power play for sure. One of the biggest adjustments was stop telegraphing it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Stop making it so obvious what you're going to do or attempting to do on every single play. And so, even if the Sharks are still working out the kinks in this, the reality is that at least teams don't necessarily know, and it's not an uncommon scheme by any means.
Right.
But
no, not at all.
Before it was like, just let those guys pretend to cycle up front as if they're going to do something, and we'll put everyone on Burns.
Well, before it wasn't even a power play like system. I mean, they were just playing the way you would in a normal offensive system. You've got your defenseman on the point, except eventually they shifted out one of the defensemen for a forward, but they were still playing the point. They were playing the wall, right? And it's going to get back to the wall. It's going to go over to Burns, and Burns is going to shoot. Right, that was the power play system, and sometimes he'll shot pass to Pavelski. Sometimes it's going to hit Hurdle right in the face, drop to his feet, and then he'll put it between his legs and through the goalie's legs. Right, but that was the system. It wasn't a power play system, right? It was just we're going to use the talent we have in the same way we would use it at 5-on-5, and it worked because when they were doing it, they had like one of the best teams in the league. As soon as you don't have one of the best teams in the league, talent-wise, and you're asking, you're filling in holes on your power play with, guys like Ryan Donato, you have to actually implement a system to utilize movement and deception and blah blah blah, right? to that point, and this is where one of the positives, but I don't think the Sharks are going to follow through on it, is that, they do have guys who are very offensively focused and dynamic, like Kevin Labanc and Ryan Donato, guys who are defensively poor and should just be power play specialists, really, right? Let them rip. Let them rip. You just have to realize that when they are on the ice, your defensemen cannot pinch. They cannot pinch.
The thing that I found interesting in these first two games is, and I agree with you guys, our offensive side is where things are looking up. I was actually really happy with our zone entries, which last season, I was frustrated we weren't just dumping and chasing because we couldn't carry across the blue line to save our lives. So it's nice to see that be improved. But it's everything you guys are saying. It's on defensive transition, we're terrible. Trying to cover when we try to overcommit is also terrible. And Labanc and Donato, I've noticed especially. Sorensen, I feel, has been nicely responsible on defense, but maybe that's just eyeball failing, because every time I look for a back-checking winger, Sorensen seems to be one of them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the fourth line looks good on defense because they're on defense a lot, and there's a lot of shots for them to defend, to some extent.
The thing I've liked in the offense, but it's annoying because it's like it feels like we're a season too slow to get to this, is playing that low cycle and doing the cross crease feed, trying to hit that cross pass to the high danger shot and just get that momentum and that movement. It's like, great. Every other team in the league has been playing this offensive strategy for 2 seasons. They kind of know how to defend against it. And Arizona's not great. So us being able to do this system on them doesn't mean that much.
Well, I think you can say that about anything right now. Because again, I don't think, to your point, Phoenix is that great.
Well, I think we can score. I think we can score on anybody. Like, I think this team can score on anybody, but I think any team that takes one look at 5 minutes of our defensive zone, they're just like, oh, 2 bodies in front of Jones and just shoot. And that's what we're going to see, and we're going to get lit up.
Well, unfortunately, half those bodies are Sharks players piling up in front of Jones and in his eyes.
I think the issue with the D side of stuff is that we are still running. We're hyper focused on the offensive side of the defense when the defensive side of the defense is not sound and hasn't been sound for quite some time. So by trying to put all the emphasis on scoring, and don't get me wrong, offense generated from the defense is great. It's great, but the defense also has to play defense, and the goaltending also has to be sharp. But we have capable forwards who can also generate offense. I mean, one of the things that I loved was seeing Kane on that breakaway just drive through and score. And and I saw great stuff, from Donato. I thought Leonard looked, pretty solid. Like Hurdle's line was great. Like, I'm not really worried about the offense's ability to drive the offense. I'm more worried about the defense's ability to play actual defense, and then they can worry about helping drive more offense.
It's also that the Sharks lack speed, right? So you can't really play too much of a responsive, defensive system where it's like, well, let's play a risky offensive system that is going to give up the puck potentially at the blue line or in the center ice or whatever. If you've got Tomas Hertl, John Leonard, and Logan Couture on the ice, because they can't get back. And at the same time, if Burns pinched and Burns' partner is not paying attention, then you're giving up a 2-on-1, and that has already happened.
You mean the 4-on-1 we gave up?
Well, there's that too. To Burns' credit, he really got back on that one. Really moved fast to do it, but
Well,
I am not encouraged.
When was the last time you've seen a 4-on-1 develop out of 5-on-5 play like that?
I mean, probably 14 times last year in Sharks games is my guess.
Sharks games
Like,
specifically.
that's again, because, and I think we did see this definitely with DeBoer's system shifting to be very offensively focused last year, and then Bugner didn't change it much because, can you really change systems that deeply mid-season? I mean, I would argue that just continuing to do the same dumb shit that is getting you shellacked just means you're going to keep getting shellacked. But whatever. I mean, that's the way things are, I guess. The team isn't really built to play the system that the team seems to be putting in place, and that continues to be an indictment of coaching, basically.
Well, and that's why my hope, as mentioned before, and I know you agree, but my hope is that the Sharks don't focus on attempting to win a cup this year, because it's not going to happen, and
Correct.
instead focus on making the shifts necessary to get this team long-term in the position that it needs to be, and really start to figure out what these schemes are. I have no problem with the Sharks trying and failing things this year. I really do not have an issue with that. I mean, It sucks that we've got a couple of guys who are going to eventually just age themselves out, if not already. But I would much rather see that and have an understanding of where the Sharks are going. I think one of the more frustrating things about being a fan of this team right now is seeing this gap. There's this gap, right? And you even see it within the roster itself, right? Where you have a gap where you've got this core 2.0, which should have been handed off ages ago and wasn't, right? So now core 2.0 is actually up there. And then you've got this gap with, the so quote unquote youth or prospects, which, we don't have the strongest prospect core in the NHL. And you see it here with what they're doing. Like, what are you doing? We keep talking about identity. We talked about that the last couple of years. And it's sort of like, as a fan, the expectation that the org keeps trying to set, which is, hey, we can win a cup. We might be a cup capable team. In the past, that was absolutely true. It's not true this year. I'm sorry to break it to you. And again, barring COVID craziness or something else happening, it's just not very likely. So, like, if you were to come out and say, and I get that it's tough for teams to do this, especially in this market. It's not a hockey market, but if you were to come out and say, hey, this year is about figuring out our future. I'd be all in. Yep. I wouldn't read too far into anything. I wouldn't get hot and bothered about stuff. I'd be like, oh, okay, they're trying this. Okay, this. Now, you can't do that forever. Obviously, if this went on 2 or 3 seasons, I'd be like, come the fuck on, what's going on? But in this instance, I'd be totally fine with it. But it's just sort of this mirage of like, just cloudy, not really being sure what the org is actually thinking.
And that's how you would actually produce a team that is going to, in 2 or 3 years, challenge for a Stanley Cup again. And in that vein, like, I think the top 9 is pretty well constructed. I mean, Nieto maybe doesn't need to be the guy in the top 9, but whatever. I mean, I've always liked Nieto, and he's here, and he's got a lot of NHL experience. So why not let there be one guy on that line who is
Long Beach native? Sorry,
played a lot.
You got to refer to him by his full name.
But the real indictment this season is continuing to roll out a fourth line of never gonna be's, like Shellman, Nazen, and Sorensen.
That's confusing. That's confusing to me.
Those are guys you have on your fourth line if you are stacked in the top 9, and these are your guys who are just going to go out for a shift against the other team's fourth line and eat minutes, right? But what your fourth line should be this year should be guys who you think are going to be part of what you're doing 3 years from now, right? That are going to be in your top 9 3 years from now.
Yeah, if I can chime in on that actually before we actually get to the games themselves. Listener Alex, not me, not an invisible imaginary friend, the actual person who listens. He actually hit me up about that right before the first game, asking my thoughts on the fourth line specifically, and I said, I don't understand what that fourth line is. It's not a grinding fourth line, which the Sharks have tried to employ in the past. It's not a fast fourth line. It just seems like the extra guys that we don't quite, they don't quite fit on the makeup of another line, so we put them here, and that to me was just very baffling.
Yeah, sorry, Colin. One quick thought, and then over to you. Is that these are the guys we thought were going to be, the important parts for a Stanley Cup team, and whoops,
Well, for me, it's more these are the guys who we were probably thinking would be spread out throughout the lines, or at least on the third line somewhere, and they're not. So we don't really. But the fourth line doesn't seem to have much of a plan, at least not in the way that it's been put together. Colin, last thought before we get to the actual game breakdowns.
Well, I've been for the entire time we've done this podcast, I've been trying to think on how I would summarize Wilson's tenure as GM. And I would just say he is the GM of other people's ideas. Every time we do something now, it just seems to be like, yeah, that was a good idea somebody had 3 years ago. Didn't quite work out, but let's see. And I start putting that frame over things of our team. I'm like, wait, when we signed Burns, yeah, that was a good idea that somebody had that didn't work out. Carlson,
maybe. I think the tough spot that Wilson is in, to be fair to him to an extent, is that, retooling on the fly is hard. It's hard.
Oh yeah.
Teams, a lot of teams do not successfully do that. What they do is they take a couple of bad seasons and they rebuild. They do a proper rebuild. And I think, I don't know whether or not the business drives that, whether it's, Hasso or whatever the situation really is that drives it. I mean, I think it's just logical that they don't want to have bad seasons around here. But, you're kind of like, you've got these pieces that you're trying to add to continuously. It's tough because you can't go back and go, all right, clean slate. Now let's do this and build this.
And let's give Wilson credit. He's put at least 2 teams together that was like, this is it. This all we need is somebody to drive this team to a cup, and we're there. Who do we got?
I think more than 2 teams.
Oh, no, I said at least 2. At least 2
Yeah.
rosters were like, okay, this is all but a lock. And like, granted, one of those rosters just got skull fucked by injuries, so
yeah,
that was unfortunate. But like, he's put together cup teams. He didn't have the coach in each of those situations.
All it takes is, you need the coaching, you need 4 lines, you need health,
and a lot of luck.
And if you don't have, one of those things, well, you don't have the luck, that's for sure. And there you go. Well, listen, we did have 2 games. Let's break these down real quick. Sharks' first game started pretty well, I thought. 2 goals in the first period from Tomas Hertl, and I know I was an idiot. I was one of the idiots going, could we see a first period hat trick? We wouldn't. But seeing Hertl come out and score, I mean, say what you will about how pretty or not pretty some of those goals were. It's great to see Hertl looking fine. Like, he looked fine. And I was really worried. I mean, he's taken so many, like, most careers would end after like one of those, 1.5. And the fact that he keeps kind of bouncing back is super encouraging.
I mean, he's an expert at it. He's an expert at rehabilitating knees. So, fucking blow up his knee. He doesn't give a shit. He's going to just rehabilitate it again.
But we do need him for the games. We don't want to miss games. But he does have, but I'm sure he will have an amazing career as a PT post-retirement. Should do that for knees. The Sharks should finish that first period up 2-0, and things felt pretty encouraging. Second period, Connor Garland would score. It would be 2-1. Then in the third period, we would see a wonderful breakaway by Evander Kane. Great goal. By the way, I should point out here that at that point, Leonard had 2 assists, which is great. And that Hertl line, was looking great. Then the third period, we get a little shaky. Clayton Keller would score, making it 3-2. And then with 3-something seconds left, the guy that looks like he eats a million hot dogs, and that's not even my joke, but it's true. He just looks like the schlubbiest of hockey players. It's amazing that he ends up being, as good a hockey player as he is. Phil Kessel would score, and that would make it 3-3. And then OT, it was this pretty nerve-wracking back and forth. I actually think that Jones had a couple of nice saves within that OT. And then, hey, we get to a shootout. And I will say this. I thought the Sharks looked great on the shootout. Donato scored, which was great.
Yeah.
Logan scored. I mean, it was, I felt that's an area where I felt comfortable with our offensive options for sure.
The thing that almost never happens anymore is the thing you're comfortable with.
But you know what though?
Really?
Listen. In a season where the Sharks are going to get scored on a lot, and they're going to fight to try to outscore. Let's be real.
Are you
There's
just
probably a high likelihood here. I'm speculating. There's probably a high likelihood that we're going to see a fair amount of overtime that we shouldn't be seeing.
right?
And then if we happen to get past that point, I would like my team to be able to do one thing.
Are you just going to erase the fact that they gave up a goal with like 2.5 seconds left to end up in OT?
That was infuriating. You know what was really interesting was at first when I watched that goal, I threw my hands up and was cussing Jones's name. But then as I watched it more and more, that was a complete team and defensive breakdown. Like,
Yep.
One of my biggest concerns out of these two games, again, in the first impression category, is that I am not seeing the Sharks play 3 periods of hockey, 3 full periods. I am not seeing that. I'm seeing them play 2 or 2.5. Like, you got to play all the way. And if they don't do that, they're screwed. They're already going to struggle.
To that point, this was a 2019-2020 Sharks special. The long change is the problem that fucked them. The second period.
Yeah. Well,
they didn't give up a ton of goals there, but they got, they lost possession and, just got dominated.
Yeah. How annoying was it, though, after the last, 2 years or so, to watch a team that has struggled to start the game come out and actually start well and then just not carry on all the way through? Like,
To me, the most frustrating thing, and when I heard fucking Bogner's comments on, Carlson skated like 35 minutes in the first game. Well, there's 5 minutes overtime. It's like, no, asshole. The point is you had a lead and you kept putting all your like win the game players out there in every situation so that when you were in an overtime, womp womp, they're tired.
Yep.
Like part of the reason you have younger players on your bottom 6 is so that you can skate them more when you have a lead and you can then capitalize on your skill players in those high danger situations. Offensive face-off, put Carlson out there. Penalty kill, defensive face-off, let Carlson sit.
Well, they didn't have a body because Milosh only played 5 minutes. So,
exactly.
He put himself in this position. And you're right. I mean, this is again another coaching concern is that they haven't actually learned anything from driving, Carlson and Burns through a wall the last few years, because those guys are playing, as you say, way too many fucking minutes. And it's because, they're treating every game as a must-win thing in a season where that's just not right. It's just not. Stop it. Stop, Bogner. Stop.
And they're treating our defense especially, but they're treating our team like these guys are all 25 and they can all skate every situation and just skill their way out of it or muscle their way out of it. It's like, dude,
we're
playing
age.
The Blues next. We're playing one of the biggest teams in the NHL who's known for just setting up shop in your offensive zone and beating on you. And you're going to put Carlson on a defensive faceoff on the PK, he is going to get mobbed. If Carlson was actually tasked with being, covering the slot, I don't know if anyone on our defense is tasked with that job. It seems like not. But, let's say we task one of our defenders with covering the slot. Those guys are going to get murdered. We do not have a big defense. We have a couple big guys, like 2. But no, we can't outmuscle a team in the slot. We can't, push for that position. And you're going to put our one of our smallest defenders, who's also known for skill and known for having fragile ankles, into that position. It's rough. It's rough to watch.
Yeah. Well, that was that game, guys. They did have a second game playing against the same team, and I know that's going to feel weird. And no, not back-to-back. I know they do have back-to-backs, a lot of them, but no, not a back-to-back. That's just how the NHL is doing their season this year, to dodge around COVID, which is smart, I guess, if you're not going to be in a bubble, which is play series. This game started pretty nice again. I got excited with the goal early on from Ryan Donato, but it was not as encouraging a game. I'm not going to go all the way through. I'm going to tell you that Donato, Meyer, and eventually late in the third, Hurdle would score. Once again, solidifying that those lines are pretty good. But the Sharks lost this game 5-3. This game was, if the first game had moments of sunshine, I felt like this game was a rude awakening. Again, Phoenix doesn't appear to be good. Not that I would expect them to be good, but the Sharks didn't look great. Now, to be fair, the Sharks, again, not having exhibition games or anything else, there's rust to be cleared off. 2 games in 3 days, yada, which I know is normal, but just pointing out that they haven't played for 10 months or however many months. Probably a bit tricky, but it didn't really look like it looked like Phoenix had improved a little bit here, and it felt like the Sharks did kind of just try to play the exact same game, and that's not if you're playing a season where there's season series in particular, you do need to adjust here because even early on, it's like when you look at the playoffs, right? One of the failures that the Sharks had in DeBoer was they might start all right, and they wouldn't make any adjustments, and the other team will have figured them out, made adjustments, and beaten them. So even though it's just a 2-game series, that's another thing I saw that I wasn't super encouraged about. But again, way early as far as that stuff goes. I would just like to feel a little more confident and comfortable. What did you guys think?
You nailed it. What I saw was one team adjusted, the other team didn't, and we unfortunately were the team that didn't adjust. And the thing, you won the game. The only reason you didn't win the first game in regulation is you just couldn't manage your team to hold on to the lead. And then you go and just scramble the lines between games. I guess you're trying to give everyone a look, but I didn't think Shellman was that bad. He's faster than Nason, and he was keeping pace and driving pace sometimes with his line. But why change that? Why scramble the lines between games like that and then do absolutely nothing in your tactical adjustment? Whereas Arizona was just I think the slot is open. Let's make sure there's always someone in that slot just in case. And I think it was their 3rd goal or their 4th goal where it was just pass from the red line to winger in the slot by himself with a free look at the goal. I mean, you might as well have just given that winger a gun and given Jones a blindfold. It was rough. Ben, your positive comments?
No, I don't have anything really positive to say about this game. Defensive breakdowns were a problem. Jones wasn't great. The Sharks were down.
Was Jones, in his play, was he significantly different or worse than the first game? Because I felt like Jones was really consistent. It's just, the other team went, oh, this is how we can get those shots. And Jones was like, dudes, help. One shot, I think. I was like, come on, Jones, get that one.
Well,
I definitely do not think, again, I definitely do not think Jones is getting the help that he needs. I really do not in these first 2 games. I think the first game, I think he's looked a bit better than I recall him looking, especially in the last season. It's too small a sample size to really tell for sure. But, this has got to be a tandem situation here, not goaltending tandem, which it probably does as well. But the Jones again, goaltending's hard, folks. It's hard. Yeah. I know it's really easy, especially if you haven't played the position. It's really easy to just say, well, at the end of the day, he has to make the save. True, he is your last line of defense between a goal and not a goal. But the reality is that a goaltender's only going to be able to do so much for so long. And I'm not saying he's been even taxed yet, because I don't think he's been taxed. And that is something that kind of concerns me. But the fact of the matter is that this defense or this team right now is really, really not acting defensive minded and not doing him or Dubnyk. When Dubnyk really starts to come in and play more, I'm sure it'll be the same. Not really doing him a lot of favors. So I don't necessarily know that I think that Jones got markedly worse necessarily. I just think that this team, when it makes a mistake, it's making really bad mistakes.
So I guess I need to try to erase the nuance that I know goes over a lot of people's heads when I say these things. Jones is not an NHL caliber goalie. Period. It doesn't matter how bad the defense is in front of him. He's declined to the point where he's a replaceable part. He's equal to an Aaron Dell or a Devin Dubnyk, who's also on the downside.
I agree.
So fucking stop equivocating, right? Like, look at on the other side. Arizona's not very good defensively either, but fucking Raanta, except for the one puck he bumblefucked, stopped more fucking shots than
that's fair.
Jones did. So fucking this is what the team refuses to sort of admit to itself. Jones is not good enough, and he's not good enough in front of a bad team.
Yeah.
So that's just period. So anyway, to finish what I was going to say, we can tell this team is not particularly good because even when they were down 4-2, they couldn't push into the Coyote zone consistently, right? Normally what you see is when a team is down by 2 goals, that's where all of a sudden it looks like they're kicking ass and they start to hold possession because teams tend to kind of sit back once they've got a 2-goal lead or so. We call that score effects. But the Sharks couldn't even get that going.
Well,
so now part of it was the fact that this team continues to have discipline problems, and part of that continues to be that when Evander Kane takes a penalty, he then takes a stupider penalty not long after that, and then he takes an even stupider penalty not long after that. So again, coaching, accountability, stupidity. This is our Sharks team.
Well, Ben, I think you also need to admit something to everybody that you've been on the phone with Arizona and you're like, hey, Arizona, if anyone but Carlson has the puck, just stand in the neutral zone. They'll just wing it to you. just stand in the neutral zone.
I did mention that earlier, that nobody else can pass from our defensive side.
Yeah, exactly. And I noticed that and I realized, that's one of the adjustments I saw Arizona doing. Ben's colluding.
Well, no, I mean, the thing is that what the Sharks need to be doing is not put all 3 fucking forwards at the blue line to take the pass. They've got to bring somebody back to collect that pass at either at our own blue line or at the center ice. And until they can start making that pass, they should probably forego the home run where we think we're the fucking Penguins, pass from the D to the forward core. So.
Yeah, it's rough to watch, and man, like it's really bad that I'm looking forward to us playing certain teams just because I want to see how badly that exact play gets blown up.
I'm actually excited about that exact same thing. Not necessarily because I want to see how bad it gets blown up, but because I want to see what this coaching staff does. I think for me, the biggest thing this year is it's a test of that. I mean, we made a coaching. We were excited when our coach came back as an assistant coach, and we kind of knew that there'd be a likely chance that should DeBoer get fired, that he was going to come in. I think we spoke about that, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
However, I don't think any of us were inspired by how, at least publicly, the coaching search, so quote unquote coaching search, went down. And so for me, I'm looking for, how does this coaching staff handle leadership? How does it respond? Does it make adjustments? How similar to DeBoer is this going to be, or how different will it be? And not even necessarily, for me, my interest is not even necessarily in how successful. I know that sounds like a weird thing to say. I'm just very curious to see how much of this is DeBoer, a modified DeBoer 2.0 versus we're actually moving in a different direction.
Well, wait.
To that point, there's different ways to evaluate the two coaches too. And Colin, I know you've got a thought here, but like there's the systems, which is one thing, and I think the systems we've already seen are going to be different to some extent, right? Certainly, the power play system is different because you've got a different power play focused coach. But it's also about like philosophically, which is I think the other thing we're looking for, which is what you're talking about. Like, is how will this coaching staff manage not the systems, but the failures of players to execute the system, and honestly, the fact that the players don't fit the systems that they're trying to put in place. And that's, the devil's come and due on that at some point. Sorry, go ahead, Colin.
So you interrupted me as I was about to compliment DeBoer, so That's a
Jesus!
good-
No,
good
don't do
inter-
that.
I'm going to compliment DeBoer. I know. I'm gonna dirty my mouth. So when DeBoer was trying to transition our team from like full work from defense forward to be offensive minded, he was, and you probably remember this, he was shifting around 1-2 pairings on his lines. He was trying to find that person to match up with his center to like have that, okay, here's my top line pair, here's my second line pair, and then he was rotating the off winger through those pairings to create different looks. And I really like that because it for like the 6 months or whatever it happened, it looked like we were actually trying to experiment to find just those right mixes up and down our lineup. And I was like, cool, let's keep doing this. Let's, when it works, stick with it, and let's keep going. I would love to see that sort of experimentation again, but we'll see. Like it's too early to get doom and gloom, but yeah, I'll see how we react to teams with really clear identities, because the Blues, they have a clear identity. When we're never gonna play Tampa this season.
Stanley Cup Finals.
No,
Dude,
listen,
Colin was right.
Come on now. Yeah.
Listen. Again, these are first impressions with a very small sample size. I think it's fair to say that the three of us saw a couple of bright spots, but we're not necessarily encouraged. And I think that's probably a pretty fair read on these first games. Again, I would caution anyone from going, too far over the edge, just because things can change, especially when you don't have a preseason going on. But seeing a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily encouraging. Guys, we're back to doing 3 stars of the week. I know it's been a while since we've done one of these, like forever. And even then, it was really hard to pick a 3-star, a star, unless someone scored multiple goals. 3 stars of the week. Ben, why don't you go first?
My first star is going to be Timo, because Timo is probably the best two-way forward the Sharks have, and just seems to be all over the ice. Made a beautiful pass, attempted a pass to LeBanc that ended up in the back of the net when it went off somebody else's skate. Sort of pass that you don't see the Sharks actually try to make very often, and it was very good.
He's our next captain, by the way, right? He's got to be our next captain. Assuming that the Sharks don't trade him away or something.
Yeah, I think that he'll probably be the guy who gets it. I still think they should give it to Hertl right now.
Agreed.
But
how fun would that be?
Exactly.
Awesome.
Exactly.
Awesome.
I don't know if you saw after the first game, they did their post game web interviews, and it was really funny because Evander Kane was sitting in like a nice suit, and Hertl was just in his raggedy undershirt. But the best part about it was, and my wife and I always love a Hertl interview. He gets asked one question. I don't even remember what the question was, but he gives about a 5-second, faster than you can comprehend, run-on sentence, and it's just so endearing. It's just so endearing.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. My second star is going to be Hertl, because he's played very, very well, and it's great to see him be, back and healthy. And maybe we benefited from, the extra time off the Sharks got, that he is back. If we'd started playing in September, who knows if he'd even have been ready. So awesome. My third star is John Leonard. He had a great first game, and I think he fits really, really well with what the Sharks do in the top 6. He was fine in game 2. I don't think anybody really acquitted themselves particularly well in game 2 besides maybe Timo.
Yeah.
And I do want to give a shout out to Donato, who I'm skeptical that he's the sort of guy that the Sharks should have been trying to bring in for the wing, but he's played pretty well, and as long as, again, they recognize that he doesn't understand what defense is and they just try to use him offensively, then he's fine for this year.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I have to.
All right, Colin, I'm gonna go next, only because my 3 stars are not different from Ben's. I'm just going to rearrange the order slightly, and that is basically.
Oh crap!
Sorry. I think we're all going to do the same thing here. I agree. I usually love to give a shout out to a first Sharks player and give them a high star, but I can't in this case. So Donato for me is an honorary 4-star. I totally agree with you there, Ben. The only thing that I would say different is, for me, between Hurdle and Meyer, I thought both had, both looked like two of the better players on the ice for the Sharks for sure. I would give Hurdle my first star, and I would give Meyer my second, and then Leonard my third. I agree. Again, when I look at the forwards right now, particularly those first three lines to a degree as well, I need to see more from them. I'm encouraged, which is nice. And I feel like we at least have components there that will be able to score. I mean, it could be a lot worse. We could be in a situation where we don't have defense and any offense. And I know that sounds like a far-fetched thing, but it happens a lot with teams, not us necessarily. We've been very blessed in that regard, I guess. But I just think, I'm giving an extra point up there to Hurdle, not only for the number of goals he scored, but also, again, that guy must have worked his ass off to rehab that knee. And it looked good. And, when you look at what the Sharks need, Hurdle, Meyer, Kane in particular, and I know Kane can be a tough one sometimes, those guys got to be good and continue to elevate their game. And right now, I feel like they're at least in this early sample size, they're either where they need to be or still on an upward trajectory, which is encouraging to me because, again, we got a lot of guys who I think are probably starting to hit a downward trajectory. So that's pretty key. Colin.
Well, you guys are jerks. You took my stars. So
I mean, the problem is the Sharks did not give us a ton of choices.
No, this is true. So Hurdle gets my first star above Timo. Just the thing I love most about Hurdle's play is he is a center who carries a line. It's so nice to have a younger-ish center who's actually carrying his line with him and carrying his team with him when he's playing. Whereas like Couture carries the play. Couture throws, as Ben said in the last podcast, Couture leaves it all on the ice. But he very much plays an individual game and kind of keep up with him if you can. He doesn't carry his line. And that to me is something a center has to do to be a great center. And then Timo, who the guy has vision, the guy has talent, the guy has size, Owen Nolan's one of my favorite Sharks of all time. Timo fits that sort of mold. Maybe he's a little less cocky, but
I'm sorry to say Timo needs to rot on this team. No offense to Timo. Sharks would be absolutely stupid to move him.
Yeah, agreed. And so my third star, because you guys are jerks, is going to Burns flopping to the ice on defense, because it's nice to see the classics go out.
The Starfish defensive posture, and it worked.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that concludes the two games we had this week. So again, small sample size. Hey, Sharks are sitting pretty, sorta, at 6th in the West. Not that they could really be that high or low, considering how few games have been played. They have a bunch of games this week. They continue their road trip with a game on, I want to make sure I have my dates right, Monday the 18th against St. Louis at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. They also have a game against the Blues on Wednesday at 6 o'clock, and then Friday at 5 o'clock. And then we're kind of doing these podcasts now, it sounds like on Sundays, so we're going to call that the end of our week, even though they technically play the second game at Minnesota on Sunday the 24th. Listen, Sharks hockey, it's back. Got to hear some familiar voices in our broadcast crew. Oh, I thought Scott Hannon did a good job too. I give him an honorary star as well. And I think I can't tell if it was Mailer or what on the radio, at least for the second game, but that was great too. But hey, that concludes our week. You can check us out on Twitter at Circling the Cup, and by at Twitter I really mean Ben, but he's doing the heavy lifting. Let's be honest here. You can check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/Circling the Cup. We don't post on there as regularly, but that's where you can find these live feeds if you're not looking on Twitter. We have a Discord community. Can't remember how to tell you to get there. You can go to circlingthecup.com to catch up on these podcasts. If for some reason you listen to podcasts via a web browser, which cool. You can also check us out, subscribe to this podcast, like it if you like it, or don't. Just don't be mean about it, or be mean about it, whatever. On anywhere really you can get a podcast, which would be, Spotify, the Apple podcast thing, I think, or Stitcher too. Yeah, Ben? Stitcher?
I have no idea.
Whatever. Listen, if you're listening, you know where you found us. And if you're not listening, ask a friend. Borrow their phone. It's probably on there. Otherwise, hey, I'm excited to be back. I'm excited the Sharks are back, even if I'm a little nervous about what they're doing and where they're going. But that concludes this week's podcast. Say bye-bye, guys.
Go Sharks.
Go Sharks.
Bye-bye.
All right.